I received an Amazon gift card last week, and this is what I used it for. This is the Anytone Smart, and what it is a sub-miniature, for lack of a better term, and to call it what most people call it, an export CB radio. And what that means is it's a radio that's capable of operating in basically all of the 27 megahertz CB services worldwide, because the CB services differ a little bit from country to country, and being able to do that means that it's illegal to sell as a CB in the United States, and in fact to sell with the capability of operating as a CB. So what they do with these export radios is the PLL chip in them can be configured with different jumper settings to operate on the various CB bands or on the US 10 meter amateur band. And so it comes out of the box in the United States set up as a 10 meter radio, and it won't do the CB frequencies at all. It just covers the entire 10 meter amateur band in 5 kilohertz steps from 28.0 megahertz to 29.6 megahertz. And the way 10 meters works in the United States, though, you can only use that entire coverage if you have Morse code and single sideband, because different operating modes go in different parts of the band. So this only does AM and FM, and so that, you know, there are maybe 2 or 3 frequencies that are used on AM on 10 meters. Usually just one, actually, 29.0 megahertz. And there are basically there are a handful of frequencies that can be used on 10 meter FM, but in practice there are only 2 that are normally used. And one of those is 29.6, which is the FM simplex calling frequency, and the other is 29.62, which is the most common 10 meter repeater frequency. In fact, almost all of the 10 meter repeaters that I know of in the United States are on that one frequency. And this radio does not do offsets, so you can't operate through a repeater, but what you can do is put it on 29.62 and operate simplex and on the repeater output. So that works as long as you're close enough to the station you're calling. Even if they are working through the repeater, you don't necessarily have to. Enough about that. The other things, if you remove the bottom cover, there are 2 pairs of jumper pads in there, and it comes with one of them soldered across and the other one open. And so you can desolder the one that's soldered across, and it only does CB. It no longer has 10 meters, but it'll cover all of the 27 megahertz CB services: the United States one, the German one, the Russian one, the English one, and so on. And they're all pretty close, but not necessarily the same. And some of them are FM, which is not legal in the United States. But anyway, if you do that, it just gives you those CB, the various CB frequencies. And what you do, or services, what you do is you have to hold this and turn it on, and then you can step through the various services. And it takes you to which CB service you're going to be operating. And then you turn it off and turn it back on. And now the third setting is you can desolder the one that's soldered across and solder across the one that's open out of the box. And what that does is it just gives you coverage from 25.6, I think, something like that, up to 30 megahertz. So covering the entire swath of frequencies. But there are blank spots in there. There are some frequencies that are not in there, and the reason it does that is because the CB band is not just, none of the CB bands cover, that I know of anyway, cover all of the discrete frequencies. They skip some of them. And just because, you know, that's the way the channels were chosen by the governments, because there are some frequencies that are set aside for other purposes within there. Like, I don't know, garage door controllers or whatever. So if you do that, you get more frequency coverage, but you have some skipped frequencies in there. And as it turns out, that's really not a problem, because of, like I said, the way that 10 meters is set up in the United States, the 10 meter band plan, you still get the frequencies that you need. Now, one thing about this is most of the export radios, which most of them do single sideband, but they're way overpriced. There's a huge markup on those because there's a huge market for them. And so they tend to start at around $200 and go up. And I already have HF radios that'll do 10 meter single sideband, so I didn't need this to do single sideband. I like this because it's tiny and it's inexpensive, and it does AM and FM 10 meters. And you can also use it as a CB. Not strictly legally, but that's what most people doing a search for this radio online. Just about everything I see is people using it as a CB. So anyway, if I put this in my Jeep, you know, I can theoretically use it as a CB if I were to need to, but I can also use it as a 10 meter radio. And it has two power settings, 4 watts and 8 watts, and it has two modes, AM and FM. And this is how you switch between AM and FM. And so far I like it, but I'll report further. And one thing I was going to say is that on most of the export radios it actually has a frequency readout as well as a channel readout. This doesn't have that. This only has the channel readout, so you have to have a chart basically to let you know what frequency you're on. And the owner's manual, if you just leave it in the 10 meter setting, the owner's manual does have a frequency table that tells you exactly the frequencies. And so, as you can see, maybe, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it does cover the entire 10 meter band from 28.000 to 29.695 in 5 kilohertz steps. And you know, you can use that if you just want it for 10 meters, but the problem is you'll only be able to use a few frequencies because of the way the band plan is. But that's okay. What I did was, after I did the modification to make it cover everything, I put this dummy load on it and transmitted. And I have one of my HF radios set to the CW Morse code setting so that I can hear the carrier. And I checked a lot of different frequencies to see exactly what frequency, you know, each channel is on in each mode or in each band spread. And then from that, I was looking online and I saw that there is a band chart for a Striker export radio, 10 meter export radio, that does list all of the discrete frequencies it has. And as it turns out, based on what I've found out from actually looking at the frequencies on my receiver, this matches the frequencies that are on that Striker band chart or frequency chart. So I'll post that up in case you want to look at it. And I'll also post a link to this if you want to buy one. And keep watching, because I plan to experiment with this a pretty good bit and maybe make some 10 meter contacts on it. So thanks for watching.